Hi again, everybody. This is Jeff Waters, and welcome to another edition of Memory Lane. I'm very pleased to be in the home tonight of a longtime friend, Mr. Barney Thweatt. We're here in Barney's home, and we're going to be discussing Barney's life and his career. Of course, Barney is well known throughout the area for his exploits on the basketball court, a member of one of the most famous teams in Kentucky high school basketball history. But also, Barney is well known throughout the area for his years as an educator and his civic involvement. Barney, it's good to see you, and it's a pleasure to be in your home tonight.
Glad you're here.
Barney's
Welcome.
got us the lemonade, and we have all kinds of great stuff that we're going to be looking at and sharing stories this evening as we reflect back on what has been just a tremendous career and a life that has really made a difference to all of the people that he's met over the years. Barney, when people start talking to you about your days when you were first in the public eye, I guess it starts with Brewers High School and those great basketball teams that you were on in the mid and late 1940s, culminating in that undefeated state championship season of 1948.
Well, first let me say that I'm very humble and very grateful to have been a part of such a great run. And I don't think anyone's been more blessed than I have been blessed through name recognition and all the accolades that have come my way just because I was a member of that team. And it's been a great run, and so many good things have happened to me that I just feel very humble and very grateful.
1948, Brewers goes through the season 36-0, undefeated state championship team. You had been how many years in a row counting that 1948 squad?
Well, we were sophomores, and when we were juniors, we were runners-up, and we went back as seniors and won it.
And ironically enough, in 1947, when you advanced to the state championship game, you were defeated by Maysville High School. The following year, you go back to the state tournament, enter as one of the favorites in that field, if not the overall favorite. And you meet up with Maysville again in the state championship game a second time. You and I recently were visiting with Mason Cope for a radio interview. Of course, Mason was a member of that team. And he told the story about Coach Terry, the legendary coach of that Brewers team, saying, now, boys, they beat you by 4 last year. You got to beat them by more than 4 this year. And I think you won that game by 7 points.
By 7, yes. Now, Mason remembered that. I didn't remember that. But Mason remembered a lot of things that I didn't remember.
Well, Barney, it's always good to visit, and Barney and I get started talking, and we share stories, and I'm always eager to hear some of the stories that Barney tells about some of the players that he knew, some of the coaches that he knew, and just his involvement in the high school basketball scene and the high school sports scene, because his contributions go far beyond the basketball court as far as high school sports in Kentucky. But Barney, that 1948 team, they were recognized not only as the best team in Kentucky, earning that right to be recognized as the best team in Kentucky, but you guys were widely recognized as the #1 high school basketball team in the nation that year.
I believe that's correct. At the end of the year, the Associated Press, I believe, named Brewers the #1 high school team in the nation.
Talk about that honor to know that in this small community in Marshall County, that a bunch of farm boys, for the most part, are recognized. And you're talking about, particularly in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that year. To put this into context, you had guys like Frank Ramsey at Madisonville, Cliff Hagan at Owensboro. There were a lot of great players and great teams just in Kentucky that year.
That's true, and I don't know if it ever really has sunk in about the #1 team in the nation, but just being undefeated and being the Kentucky state champion, I guess, has been enough. But that was certainly an honor to be recognized as a top team in the United States.
Talk about Coach McCoy Terry, because when I am around you and when I've had the opportunity to be around former players on that Brewers team, and unfortunately so many of them have passed away over the past few years, but I had the opportunity to be at the 50th reunion of that team back in 1998, and I got to visit with so many of those team members, and the reverence of which they spoke about Coach Terry. You guys really held him in high regard.
I don't think you could have any higher regard for anyone other than your parents. And he was kind of like a parent to us, he and his wife both. They just took us under their wing and they checked on us and they They loved us, yet they were tough. He was tough. Now, I mean, you had to do it his way, and we knew that, but he did it in a way that made us want to give our best effort. And he was way beyond his years, I think, in handling people. He didn't handle Mason Cope the way he handled Jim Owens and Barney Thweatt. He knew how to push buttons, and he was just X and O man, no. But fundamentally, things that you have to do to win games, and that's block off the boards and play good defense and take good shots and make free throws, things that he really emphasized. But he would check on us when we were ill. He'd come to our houses and bring us orange juice and different things. And he just was like a father figure.
Barney Thweatt is our guest, and we're talking about his time with Brewers when they won the state championship, one of only 3 teams in Kentucky boys high school basketball history to have gone through a season undefeated and win a state championship, and the last team to have done it on the boys' side. And quite frankly, I don't think it'll ever happen again. It's just such a remarkable feat. And the margin of victory for that Brewers team, to me, is just as impressive, if not more so, than the 36-0 record. That team won those games by an average of 44 points a contest. We're talking about Coach Terry, and you mentioned the fact that he was ahead of his time as far as his ability to relate to people, to relate to his players and so forth. He was also, and we've had this discussion before, he was also quite a bit ahead of his time in terms of some of the things he would bring to the game as far as his ideas on conditioning and style of play, particularly getting the ball up and down the floor, and that was something that was relatively new at that time.
We pressed and we ran a lot. We ran a lot in practice, not up and down bleachers, but around the gym and sprints. He made sure that we were in condition, and I would say his strongest point was that of conditioning and defending and rebounding, and we pressed. The night we scored 119 points, I don't remember ever crossing the mid-court line because I was guarding under the basket. I think I got 19 points, and everybody else scored over 20 that night. And maybe I only got 12, I don't know. But anyhow, some of those games we just overwhelmed teams by pressing them.
A few years ago, Barney undertook the task of committing so many of these memories to a book. And it's an excellent book. Barney was nice enough to give me a copy of this book, Brewers Basketball, A Winning Tradition. And it talks a lot about not just his time at Brewers, there when they made those runs at the state tournament, but also you talk about some of the other great teams that were at Brewers over the years. And even outside of that era, which is widely known throughout the state, there were a number of other great teams from Brewers down through the years.
In fact, in 1943, Brewers lost 2 games, and those were to Benton. Benton lost 2 games during the year, and those were to Brewers. But Benton went on to the Final Four. They won the district and went on to the Final Four. In 1944, Brewers was undefeated until they got the state tournament, and they got beat in the quarterfinals. And then in my freshman year, we should have gone to state because we had the best team in the region, only lost 3 games, but Milburn upset us. Then my sophomore year, we really were not the best team. We just won that night over Tillman on our last second shot. But then our junior and senior year, there's no doubt we had the best material and the best teams in the region. There's several. If I can go over this with you.
Sure.
I have seen so many great teams in this region that did not get to play in the state tournament, and I've seen many great players that did not get to play even one game in the state tournament. And here I am, fortunate enough to have been able to play in 9 state tournament games, and that makes you feel very humble. When you start speaking of teams that were really good basketball teams, North Marshall in 1958 had a good team. Heath in 1956 was undefeated until they got in the regional tournament. Lowe's in '63 had a great team. South Marshall in '64 had a great team. Bob Warren, Bill Butler, and that bunch. And so many great individual players like Charlie Lampley and Phil Rollins, and just so many great players that never did get to play in the state tournament. So we were very fortunate.
Charlie Lampley played at Sharp.
Played at Sharp.
And of course, later was coach at North Marshall, won the state championship in 1959. And then Phil Rollins played at Wycliffe, right?
Wycliffe.
And of course, Phil Rollins played at Louisville, correct?
That's right.
And Kenny, his brother, was a member of the Fabulous Five at the University of Kentucky. You mentioned some of those other teams, and I wanted to ask you about some of those. You mentioned the '63 Lowe's team. I guess Billy Chumler was probably on that team,
Billy
wasn't he?
Chumler was a great player.
Was later the head coach at Paducah Tillman for several years. And then North Marshall in '58, they were able to get back and get to the state tournament in '59 and win the whole thing.
I think maybe Pat Doyle, I believe he was sick, and didn't he have the mumps and didn't play in the regional tournament in '58?
I've heard something
I
like
believe
that.
that's right. But Billy Ricks, I remember, was a great player. And then you get people like Stan Key, and you get Martin Holland from Heath, and the Guthrie boys from Sedalia, and Tillman had some, Vard Curtis and Jim Lanson. I could name 40 players that were great basketball players that just didn't get a chance to play a state tournament. And it's unfortunate.
That era starting really with the Sharp team in 1938 that won a state championship, and then going through over the course of the next 20 plus years to the '59 team at North Marshall. There's 3 state championship teams in that span of time, but there were also, you mentioned that Benton team in 1943. I guess Joe Holland was on that team,
Holland,
later played at the
Smith-Dunn.
national championship team at Kentucky. But Hardin had a terrific team.
1941.
1941. And there were several others from Marshall County in that time frame.
I should have named Hardin because they were undefeated until they got to state tournament, and some of the players got sick, and they won the 3rd place trophy that year, so they only lost 1 game. And there's just several great teams that didn't win it, that got up there, and didn't win it. In fact, in '44, when Brewers went in undefeated, there were 2 other teams there undefeated. They call them the 3 Bs: Brewers, Brooksville, and Bowling Green. And neither one of them won the state championship.
Is that right?
But there were 3 teams that undefeated.
When you talk about basketball in Marshall County and the great tradition that started with the small high schools and then through the consolidation into the 3 high schools, Benton, North, and South, or you always had Benton, but the consolidation into North and South, and then the consolidation into the one Central High School. When you think about having 3 boys state championship teams, 2 girls state championship teams, 2 undefeated state championship teams, the Brewers in '48 and the Lady Marshalls in 1984, that's just, to me, that's amazing. I've always been amazed at the record of excellence going back so many years. Because I guess on the boys' side, there have been how many state champions from Region 1? I know Heath won it 1 year.
Heath, Cuba,
Okay.
and Brewers, and
Sharp.
Sharp, and North Marshall.
So out of 5,
I guess that's
out of 5 state championship teams from Region 1, 3 of them have come
3
from Marshall County on the boys' side, and then you have the 2 girls state championship teams. That's quite amazing to me.
I thought this was interesting. In the 30s, Marshall County had 4 teams to go to state tournament. In the 40s, they had 7. In the 50s, they only had 2. In the 60s, they had 2. In the 70s, we missed that decade. And then in the 80s, we had 4. In the 90s, we had 1, and we missed 2000. But then we've gotten 2 now, in 2010. 211, and I don't believe we'll ever go that long without having another one from Marshall County.
I sure hope not. I don't think we will either. We had a lot of near misses during that 16 years, and it was really fun to get back on that big stage at Rupp-Arena. Barney Thweatt is our guest. Barney, let's move from your days at Brewers into your college years, because something quite interesting that probably was pretty rare back in those days. You won't ever hear of it happening again, I don't think, in this era, where you have essentially an entire team that goes on to college together with Coach Terry. Coach Terry, you got all of you, which at that time was known as Memphis State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were 5 of us that went. Roy Darnell was a substitute, and he went with us. It was Van Mathis, Coy Crease, and Jim Owens and I went to Memphis State. Of course, I got injured my freshman year and didn't play at all that year. And Jim just played that 1 year and then came back and married Sue. And I told him several times, that's the best decision you ever made. But anyhow, Coy played 4 years there, and Van Mathis played 4 years there. And Mr. Terry just coached 3 years there. And then he came back as a school administrator at Sedalia and coached at Sedalia another 5 years. But my career in college wasn't very good. I got to play 1 year at Memphis State, then I laid out a year, was an assistant at Sedalia with him. And then I went back to Murray in summer school, and Coach Hodges says, if I can get you eligible, he says, I'll give you a scholarship. I worked out with them back then. And so they let me take a course. I was the only one in it, climatology, and I got 12 hours. I was taking 9 summer schools, so I got eligible. And I got to play with Garrett Bashir, who was a senior, and Doodle Floyd and Howard Crittenden were freshmen. And I got to play a lot, and we had a good team, but we got beat by Eastern in the OVC tournament.
What year was that, Barney?
53.
1953.
52, 53.
And you mentioned some of the real legends in Murray State's history there when you talk about
Garrett Bashir was
Bashir,
yeah.
Barney Thweatt is our guest. Barney, when you get out of college, you move in. Of course, even before your college career was over, you mentioned you assisted Coach Terry at Sedalia. So did you have in mind at that point that you wanted to get into coaching, or was that something that, going back even further, that was something that you wanted to do, was to get into coaching?
I really did. I wanted to coach, and I was working at Murray on building the First Baptist Church as a laborer that summer. I think I made 75 cents an hour. And the superintendent from Ferrand, Illinois, went to the office there, the personnel office at Murray State, or whatever you call it, placement office, and they told him about me, that I'd graduated and interested in coaching. He came up and interviewed me, and I went to Ferrand and took the job there. Worked there 2 years. That's up in between Effingham, Salem, Vandalia, Flora, right in the middle of those towns, a little community, and had 2 excellent years as far as people. We didn't win a lot of games. We had winning seasons, but the best people I think I was ever around, German, Dutch people that really treated me right. And then from there I came back and coached assistant at Tillman 1 year, and then I went to Oldham County for 7.
And I guess Coach Denning was at Tillman?
He was at Tillman that year. And
so you were an assistant with him?
Assistant with him. I got to be assistant under 2 Hall of Fame coaches, Coach
Yeah, that's
Terry,
what I was getting ready to say.
Coach Denning.
That had to be quite an experience.
It really was. And that was a year that Heath was undefeated, and Tillman had a good ball club that year. I think we only lost 3 games, but Heath had a good ball club, and Benton had a good team. Of course, they beat Tillman they beat Heath in the regional tournament. But my high school principal was a superintendent at Oldham County, and I was at the state tournament, and he said, "You're interested in coaching to Oldham County?" I said, "Well, I might be," and he said, "Come up and let's talk about it." So that's how come I went to Oldham County.
And went to the state Final Four.
Final Four in 63.
One of those years at Oldham County.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You were telling me, you've told me this a few times before, you knocked heads coaching-wise with Joe B. Hall.
Joe B. Hall.
During your days at Oldham County.
He was the coach at Shepherdsville, and we won the district my first year at Oldham County, and they were in the same region with us. Bullitt County, all around Jefferson, was in the 8th region. And Shepherdsville, of course, in the Bullitt County. And we played them in a regional tournament, the first game. And we were leading them 10 points. And he came up in a half-court zone press that I had not seen before. And he beat us. And I told him, I said, "You taught me a lesson that night." And I worked on that the rest of my coaching career.
Did you have any idea, being around him then, that he would get to be a national championship college coach one day?
No,
did you
had no idea. I knew he had a team that was well prepared to play, and they should have won the regional tournament. Grant County beat them, and they had a better team. But anyhow, he really has done a great job, and he's a friend of mine. We visit a lot. I've been on his program several times, and he's a good man.
Barney Thweatt is our guest. Barney's been kind enough to have us in his home. Barney's a longtime friend and has just contributed so much down through the years to athletics and to community causes and to the world of education. And of course, you can step out the back door here and walk not too far and be at one of the places that Barney really loves, and that's on Kentucky Lake fishing for bluegill, right?
I went this morning. I didn't do too well, but I caught a few nice red air.
Barney is our guest here in his home, and it's always a pleasure to visit with Barney and spend time reminiscing about his life and career. So you leave Oldham County, and is that when you came to Paducah Tillman?
Came to Paducah Tillman. In the first year there, I thought Tillman always had great talent, but we didn't that year. In fact, it was a miserable year, but we got through it. And the next year, we didn't do well in the season, but we won the district tournament, knocked a good Heath team off with Gordon Hargrove and Jimmy Long and that bunch, and went to the finals of the regional, and Buddy Poe's North Marshall team beat us in a double overtime. Then the next year, we had a good ball club, but got beat in the regional, in the semis. And the next year, we won the regional in '67. And then after I left there, they won the region 3 years in a row. So I left too soon, or else, I don't know. Many times I wish I'd have stayed.
Well, talk about the decision, because you moved from coaching into administration, right? Because you moved from Paducah Tillman and came to North Marshall, as the school principal. Talk about how all of that happened and how hard of a decision that was.
Well, I was speaking at a banquet at Aurora. Gerald Jones was coaching the 8th grade team, and they asked me to come up and speak at a basketball banquet, and Mr. Condor was there. And after the banquet, he asked me, said, would you be interested in being a high school principal? I said, well, sometime. I'm not really in right now, but he said, well, I've got a job open at North Marshall, and he says, if you're interested, come up and let's talk about it. So I got to thinking about it. Well, sometime I do want to get administration, and that was how that came about. And I've never regretted going into administration at North Marshall, but I have regretted sometimes leaving coaching. I really have.
Barney, how many years were you at North Marshall as principal?
3 years.
And went from there to Mayfield?
Mayfield.
Okay.
3 years there, and then to Christian County 14. And at Christian County, you talk about athletics and some great programs.
Gosh, yeah.
We had champions in football and basketball runner-up, and basketball Final Four, and girls in basketball, wrestling state champions, just all kinds of success there.
What years were you? You were there 14 years.
Yeah.
From when to when?
73 through 87.
So you were there in 76 when they were state runner-up in basketball. In 79,
They're runners-up.
they were runner-up in basketball. They won state championships in football in
82 and 84.
82 and 84. And of course, they've always had terrific baseball teams and excelled in other athletic programs at Christian County. And if you go to Christian County High School, I always kid Barney is in more halls of fame. This speaks to his achievements and the lack, or the amount of admiration and the lack of having any enemies. You won't find anybody that has anything bad to say about Barney. But he's in the Christian County Athletic Hall of Fame. He's in the Kentucky High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame. He's in the Marshall County Athletic Hall of Fame, and I know there's a bunch more, Barney, and you're probably too modest to mention them. But if you go to Christian County High School, just outside their gym, they have a nice display of all of their Hall of Fame inductees down through the years, and you'll find Barney Thweatt in there. That had to be quite a time at Christian County. You mentioned all of the great athletic successes. But that was a changing time in education too, wasn't it? In the early to mid 70s on through the 1980s. A
lot of discipline problems back then, but you know we had 1,865 students at one time, and we had 33% were black students and the rest white, and athletics and band and those programs helped knit that community, helped knit that school, and by being successful, it could relate to everything else in the school, and all the kids bought into it, and it just had great support. I mean, the gym would be packed when we'd play, and football, it'd fill that old stadium, you know, and we'd play over there. It wasn't a good place to play, but we had some good football there, and that was my motto as a high school principal, is to set up an environment where teachers could teach and students could learn, and to have fun doing it. So we used athletics and all the other extracurricular to pull people together to be on the team, and I think they felt like, you know, that they were part of a team.
There's a couple of well-known coaches that were there during your time. You had Lyle Dunbar, who was the boys' head basketball coach, And then Dan Goebel was the football coach and won those 2 state championships. Did you hire those guys?
Yes, Dan and Dan Goebel and Lyle Dunbar.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob Hargrove was a basketball coach when I went there, and they had won a regional championship the year before I got there. And then we got beat the first year I was there on a controversial deal over at Madisonville. We won't get into that. But then the next year we did win a region and went to semifinals against Mayo, and they had Griffith and all that bunch. And then we hired Dunbar, and of course Fred Clayton was a long-time football coach and built the program. And then when he retired, that's when we got Dan Goebel. And Dan came in and just started where Fred Clayton had left off. He left good talent, and Dan took it to a higher level.
It's quite remarkable when you think about Christian County winning those 2 state championships in football, simply because when Kentucky went to the 4-class system, and you had 4A football, which is where Christian County won their 2 state championships in 1982 and 1984. In the 30-plus years, it's probably closer to 40 years now, that you've had the 4-class football playoff format in Kentucky. There's only been, I think, 5, maybe 6 teams from outside of Louisville and Lexington that have won the highest classification state championship. Is that right?
The others have been there in Trinity and St. X and inside Louisville.
Yeah, and it's quite remarkable to even a school that's a large school like Christian County, just because it hasn't been done very often outside of the urban areas of Lexington and Louisville for a team to win that state championship in 4A, and of course now it's 6A. You have 6 classes in football. So you're done at Christian County in 1987. I guess you retired at that point.
Yes.
What did you do? Did you do any troubleshooting work, shall we say, that a lot of administrators, when they retire, they go to places that are in need of some help or in need of some folks to fill in?
Well, I worked with the student teachers and intern teams from Murray State and taught a class off campus. I did that 3 years working with the interns, and enjoyed that a lot. I visited schools all the way from Union County to Fulton County and got to be in all the different schools and enjoyed that very much.
One thing that you were very active in during your time as an administrator was high school athletics, excuse me, overall in Kentucky, and to that extent you were a member of the Kentucky High School Athletic Association Board of Control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was elected president of that board, and I was on the board when they sued us to go to class system. Dayton brought suit against us to force classification in basketball. Well, we'd run surveys many times, and the schools were just not in favor of having classes in basketball. Now, we have them in other sports, and it may come sometime in basketball, but I hope it doesn't, because our state tournament is so unique to be, any school has a chance. And sometimes the little schools win, not too many anymore, but it was really interesting on that board, because we had, like schools were to play each other round robin in the district in football. Back then they didn't have to do that. So we made a lot of different changes, and very interesting time.
Barney Thweatt is our guest. We've been looking at some of the material. We showed you the book earlier. Barney, if somebody were to want to get a copy of this book, is it still available to get a copy of that book?
No, I don't have any.
It's a collector's item now.
I've got a loaner, but they have to really sign their life away to get to borrow it.
Barney also has kept the programs. This is the 1946 state tournament program, and then you have the 1947. This was the year that Brewers was runner-up in 1947, and then, of course, the 1948 program that was the year that Brewers went undefeated and won the state championship. I was looking at your wall of fame, your wall of recognition earlier, and all of the newspaper articles and the many things. And on your wall, you had a letter from Coach Rupp that he sent you, and then from Bobby Knight, and then from Red Auerbach, and you've come across a lot of famous people in your career, haven't you?
Well, I have. I got to see the Celtics play in the Boston Garden back when Coach Arbach was coaching and Larry Bird was playing, and I'm not sure he was still coaching. Did he ever coach Bird, or he just drafted Bird?
He just drafted
Okay,
him.
but he was there that day. And the reason I got a letter from him, my daughter was an airline attendant, and anytime she saw somebody in sports, she'd go, "Could you give me an autograph? My dad thinks a lot of you." So he wrote me that note. And Bobby Knight, I never had met him personally, but I wrote him one time and commended him on an article he had in Sports Illustrated. And by the way, I had a lot of respect for Bob Knight. A lot of people don't like him, but I think he stood for some things that were good in sports. And the way he went about it might not have been the most diplomatic way, but yes, I met a lot of interesting people.
And of course, Barney himself. A lot of people would say that Barney Thweatt's one of the most interesting people that they've met. Barney, talk about, before we let you go, the changes in your time in education to now, and some of the things you think where we could improve as far as education? In education.
Somehow, some way, do away with a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the time that teachers have to spend documenting what they've done and prove what they've done, and it's just burdensome. They tell me, and you know, if you spend all your time having to document and prove what you've done, you're not preparing to teach. You're just after the fact, and I think that's one thing. If they could lessen the amount of paperwork and get good discipline, get boards of education that would stand behind superintendents, and superintendents would stand behind principals, and have law and order in the schools, I think you could still have that. I know there's some things you can't do that we used to do. We used to paddle them, or we'd suspend them, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, but now I know there's different hoops to jump through, but I still think you can have law and order in any school, and the students will buy into it. I think they want to behave. I think they want to learn. But we've got to set an example that we got to demand that they behave.
Jim Shelton, longtime football coach at Marshall County, used to tell me that the kids haven't changed. We just don't put the same kind of pressure on them that we used to.
I agree.
There's probably a lot of truth in that statement. Barney, our time unfortunately is gone. Every time we get together, we spend a lot of time talking and telling stories, but appreciate so much you having us in your home this evening and sharing a little bit about your remarkable life and career.
Come back and I'll cook you some of those bluegill.
Well, I was kind of hoping for that tonight.
Well, they're frozen.
We'll make another date and come back and do it. All right?
Okay.
Barney, good to see you. Always good to visit with you.
Thank you.
Barney Thweatt, a real Marshall County and Western Kentucky legend. Thanks for joining us tonight.